too bad. No news?
Nothing special, except we're a bit excited about introducing our new workflow process to everybody, so that should be fun.
Yeah, so look, Fred has been really busy over the last few months doing a new version of our ATS in-house workflow process. This is a process that we have developed for the Metatrader 4 environment, which allows us to compile very comprehensive diversified trend following portfolios. Our prior process was a fairly lengthy process, but Fred has now been significantly upgrading that process to a much more simple method, but we believe it's just as comprehensive as what we previously did.
I think it's actually more comprehensive and probably takes a little longer, but it's a lot easier to implement from our members' perspective.
Yeah, so the idea being that there is always a degree of discretion in some of the settings you apply for your diversified portfolio, but once the discretion has been applied, we try and automate as much as we can using the market data as a basis for our decision making.
It's all about the data, yep, for sure.
Yep. All right, so shall we get into our presentation we've just made?
Yeah, well that should clarify it for everybody, for sure. Yeah, let's do that.
All right.
So Rich, here we got our first slide which talks about the objectives of what we're trying to achieve here, and it's all about the workflow process. And the idea here is to develop a diversified, systematic, trend-following trader. So at the end of all this, we have to have a trader that is, in fact, systematic and trend-following. And we're going to use the MT4 environment to do this. And we have the process is designed to develop this robust, diversified, trend-following portfolio. And this is a complete process that we do periodically, but probably annually, and depending on your need, you can do it more often. And you'll see how easy it is to do, so you can run it as often as you like. Sure.
So this process, it looks at two forms of robustness. What we would call robustness in relation to the application of these models across vast long-term data sets, but also includes an adaptive component that ensures that our models sort of respond to more recent market conditions and have an adaptive quality in them. So that there's sort of two processes embedded in this workflow process that allow us to keep these end stage portfolios we've developed what we call razor sharp, always up to date fairly. So then each year that we redo this process, we're just continually sharpening the portfolio.
And we're using the market data to do this, so we're not adding any of our own influences on it. We're waiting to see what pops out at the end.
Love it, Fred. Okay.
So step one, we're calling them step one, but in reality there's just a number of steps in this process, is the design development phase. So what we wanted to come up with was a set of rules that we could apply across the whole universe that is pretty simple. And here we are with a list here, the golden rules of trend following: cut your losses short, let your profits run. We've added in an ATR based normalisation process, which means we can compare markets against each other by using an ATR, and the real underlying goal here is to keep it simple.
Yeah, so to keep the number of variables we use low. That means that our models aren't sort of encouraged to become over curve fit in relation to past data. In relation to the design development, what we do is we prefer to adopt an approach that first looks at the edge that we want to extract from the market. In this case, we want to extract trends from the market, so that therefore allows us to develop trend following models in this design phase, which enforces that principle and the method that we attack that edge into our models. This therefore allows most of the heavy lifting of our models to be influenced by the designs themselves, and the impact of the data mining we do within this workflow process sort of weekly varies options around those golden rules of trend following.
Yeah, and we've got 6 main strategies that we're dealing with. They're all basically trend following from the point of view of looking for alternative entries to get into those trends and to to find that edge, as you say, in the market data?
Yes, so in this suite of 6 models, we might have some breakout techniques, some alternative trend following techniques. So the idea being with these different models, we get this strong system diversification within our portfolio that allows us to attack different sections of trends and their components.
And we will at a later video talk about what these 6 core trend following models are, but for now just assume or just understand that there are multiple entry techniques, but there's a very common theme to this, and that is the golden rules.
Lovely. Okay, let's move on to step 2.
So this is where we data mine, and what we do now is we use MT4 in the strategy tester environment using the optimizer, but we've got a twist on that. We're not using the optimizer per se, we're just using it as a data mining tool. And so we can, and we have, defined our rules around this, and the data mining goes through and identifies all the possible scenarios.
Right, so the intent of this is to develop all possible permutations or variations of these simple solutions, and in this process we're also defining our testing universe that we're going to be undertaking our portfolios, or defining our portfolios within. We'll be using very long-term data sets for this data mining phase. Do you want to explain about the ignoring trading costs and why we do that?
Yeah, what we're looking for is the market that shows a bias towards trending, and so we don't want to be influenced by broker slippage, by swap costs, by spreads, etc. So we ignore those and we grab this information, we put into a database effectively, and that's why we say we're not using it as an optimization run, we're just using it to collect the data.
Right, so this phase is essentially just to find models that capture trends, irrespective of the cost treatment, etc. This is the first stage where we're looking at all of our different parameter sets and how they've coped with different trending environments in the data.
Yeah, we're not making any decision at this point. All we're doing is collecting that data. So some of these are working, some of these are not working. Doesn't matter, it's all going into the one basket, into the one data set that we're going to then analyse further.
Like it, Fred. Let's move on to step 3.
So at step 3 now, what we're looking for is, we've identified markets. We've got maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 markets, whatever we're looking at. And we're trying to see whether there's any commonality in those markets in terms of our strategies to garner the edge out of those markets. And so we're looking how many of these markets actually exhibit the same parameter sets. And so we're using this normalized data approach, which means we can compare and contrast. And then we're going to, and maybe you want to talk about the extended histories, but in reality, because we're using a common data set, we're using a normalised market, we can actually pile all of this information into one big database.
Yes. Look, one of the things is each of our systems and each individual variation of a system applied to long-term data, historic data of say 30 to 40 years, might only capture 6 to 8 trends within that environment. So each of our return streams has a fairly low sample size, trade sample size. But how we use this multi-market feature is we say, if we've normalised this market data across 40 other markets, these present 40 alternate histories to the history that we see in a particular market, and therefore we can lift our trade sample size by 8 times another 40 markets to test the efficacy of this approach. So it's a way of incorporating different data sets that can test the robustness of our strategies under a different array of historic conditions.
And along this path we're going to have to invariably cull some of these out. And so with our multi-market approach, we're looking to see where the most common markets apply. And so we will be filtering out any that, if we only get one hit on one particular strategy, then that's not going to feature. We're looking for how many of these multi-markets we can capture.
I see. Yeah, good idea. And this step 3 is regarded as our first stage robustness test that we do for all of our trend following models. We'll move on to step 4 now.
So now that we've got a ranking based on multi-market approach. We're now going to see how this might work in a real life scenario. So we're adding back the costs. We're putting the spreads and the swap, etc. Slippage, a little bit difficult to do in MT4, but we've overcome that by effectively doubling our spread. So our typical spread might be 2 pips, and in our testing we'll go to 4 pips just to give us a bit of a slippage factor in there. And so we're also going to now, instead of using our 40 or 50 year back test, we're going to now look back over a shorter period of time, and that then adds in a bit of recency to our calculations. And in order to get past this step, and again we're trying to cull, we're looking for only models that deliver a positive MAR, so they've got to be profitable, and then in fact a profit factor of some minimum level. And when in this particular example we've set it at a 1.2 profit factor, but in my own testing I've set that at 1.4 just to give a bit more punch.
So just to state this clearly, in step 3 where we tested robustness, now we pass those models that have all been tested for their robustness now into this recency phase, which looks at their performance in relation to more recent market conditions. So for example, we might use a 10-year look back over this period, a much shorter look back, but looking at how trends have performed in more recent market conditions. The idea being that at the end of this exercise, our selection will not only be robust, they'll also have this adaptive component in it that responds to more recent trending environments. So we'll move on to step 5.
Yep. Now that we've gone through this phase, we know which traders are going to work for us. We're now trying to find which combination of our strategies work best on a particular instrument. So we might look at the euro, for example, and we might look through our historical data, our recency data, all the rest of it, and then try to come up with a possibility of maybe 200-300 possible scenarios. And from that to try and iterate, and when we say iterate, we're trying to combine those various equity streams down into a portfolio or a sub-portfolio of maybe 10 or 15, depending on how many you personally want to trade with. So we're going for 10 EAs in the euro to give us the best effective MAR or serenity ratio.
Right, so this step 5 is what we call the optimal system diversification within a single market. So on the prior phases, we have all of these different possible successful, robust and adaptive combinations. Now what we're doing is we're iterating at the sub-portfolio level for an individual market and compiling the best strategies of the different models that we've designed. So we might have, as an example, 10 models that we ultimately select as our chosen system diversification for a single market, and within that we might have a number of breakout models and a number of various other trend following models that when we iterate their return streams, they produce the optimal MAR ratio or serenity ratio from the process.
And this iteration process it works over a vast array of different combinations. We do our testing on 1 million iterations. So we randomly pick 10 equity streams, combine them to come up with an equity that we record, and then we compare the next run against the previous run, and if it's a better MAR we keep it, if it's not such a good MAR we delete it, and we move on 1 million times to try and come up with.
So we're swapping in and swapping out different systems in a compilation to see what is the optimal combination for a MAR or serenity ratio at the end of this exercise.
Correct.
Right, now on to step 6.
So now that we've got a sub-portfolio for each individual instrument, we probably, on our calculations, we may have 40 instruments we're trading with. We've got 10 EAs in each of those. There's a possibility of 400 traders. Now 400 traders is probably a bit much for most retail traders to deal with. So the question then is, how do you cull that even further? And we've made a decision that rather than try to iterate across 40 markets, we will take the best combination of markets to come up with a trader. So we might choose 15 instruments to combine into a portfolio, and we do that by grabbing the individual sub-portfolios and iterating them again to come up with that number.
I see. So this is a means that we can strip back our portfolio to work within the limitations of a retail trader's finite capital and access to broker platforms. For instance, we might find that we might need to split our portfolios across multiple broker accounts, which we can achieve to achieve wider diversification, but a lot of traders with smaller amounts of capital might need to restrict their portfolio. This step is the way that they can optimally configure their final portfolio in relation to their initial sort of their thresholds and in relation to what is the best combination.
The other thing to remember here is we've done our data mining across the whole universe, and that universe will probably consist of Forex, indexes, commodities, CFDs, whatever we want. But when we come to this phase, we can select groupings. We might decide to create a sub-portfolio of Forex and a different sub-portfolio of indexes and trade them on different
commodities,
and we can combine them in any which way we like. So we've done our data mining, we've done the hard yards, we've now got the luxury of being able to pick and choose how we want to combine those to come up with a final portfolio.
Lovely, Fred. All right, on to step 7.
Well, the best part about all of this is when you drop out to step 7, you've got one EA. That one EA uses the information that we've gathered along the way, and it'll trade across that whole portfolio.
So we might have 200 solutions in that one EA.
Correct. So this one EA gets loaded on each of the individual instrument charts, and off we go. So what we do then is we incubate that in our walk forward phase, if you like. We're not walking forward in hindsight, we're walking forward in real time. So we're letting it run to see how it performs.
And we undertake a process here where we compare and contrast our walk forward results against our back test to make sure that they're synchronized and working correctly together. And we also check for any possible execution issues, which we've already eliminated effectively through our process, but it is possible that there might be some execution issues which you can pick up during this incubation phase. So we must be getting close to the live trading step, which I think is the next step, Fred.
Yeah, so then it's a question of how long do you want to run that walk forward test or that demo test, and that's again up to the individual, but we would recommend a couple of months at least, maybe even longer. And I know one or two of our members are already looking at 6 to 12 months for that to prove out. But then once you're ready to go, we then have that trader can flip across and trade in a live environment.
Lovely, Fred.
Now, the other thing to remember here is that we're not guaranteeing anything here with all this. We're just saying from the past data we've collected this, and you as the user have basically been massaging the results as you come along, and we're providing the tools to enable you to do that.
Yes, this is not us developing end-stage algorithms here. This is giving a process to people to develop their own algorithms through this entire workflow process. So it's up to them to set what they're looking for, but we give them the tools to allow them to achieve that in a very smooth, iterated manner.
Yeah, so if anyone's looking to develop a portfolio of trend-following traders, this is a great tool.
Love it. Well, that's great, Fred. So we've just now introduced the workflow process. This is going to be, we're going to be running about 7 or so videos that step people through progressively through this entire process, where we demonstrate the different stages of the process in future videos. It's something that it does take a bit of time to get the head wrapped around, but once you get familiar with the process, and we will be stepping through it in detail, once they understand the process, then it's very easy to regenerate that process, isn't it?
Yeah, our previous incarnation of this was fairly manually intensive. You had to go through and step by step run through each individual instrument that you wanted to run through. You had to run each individual instrument against each individual trader. So 40 instruments by 6 traders, there's 240 odd run-throughs that each have to be initiated manually by the user. What we've got now is you set this up once, you click the button once, and you walk away and you come back in a couple of days and it's all done for you.
Yes, I've noticed I've run this already on about 40 different markets to develop a portfolio using 6 different systems. 10 systems within each market. That took me a total time of around about 3 days, 4 days, which has saved me weeks of time from the prior in-house process we had. And I think there was probably 5 clicks of a button I needed to do through the entire process. There are certain setups you need to do for each of the stages.
You can't just set and forget. You need to go through and understand what's going on. There's lots of parameter options, as you'll see when we get into the next video. But for those who aren't necessarily 100% trend followers but like to set a target, there are options for setting that as well. Not that we've done that in our own trading, but the trader allows you to do a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, thanks very much, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed this session. We're looking forward to rolling out this step-by-step guide to our in-house process. For our members, of course, as we're stepping out these processes, we'll be providing these algorithmic workflow processes within our forum. So we encourage anyone who's interested in this to become a member of the Traders Outpost with ATS, where in our forum we collaborate and discuss these different processes in detail with all of our members. And it allows any troubleshooting or queries to be responded to quickly. So, yeah.
So welcome and good. See you next time.
Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.